The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew. As Jesus passed on, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the customs post. He said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. While he was at table in his house, many tax collectors and sinners came and sat with Jesus and his disciples. The Pharisees saw this and said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" He heard this and said, "Those who are well do not need a physician, but sick people do. Go and learn the meaning of the words, 'I desire mercy, not sacrifice.' I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners." This is the good news of our salvation. And to understand this gospel on the feast of St. Matthew, who wrote the first gospel according to tradition, we have to go back to the social context, the cultural period when Jesus was in the midst of his public ministry. The Holy Land was under the dominance and the oppression of the Romans. They did not believe in one God, and they did not follow the Mosaic Law with its all 613 statutes. There was therefore a big difference between the chosen people and the ones who were dominating them at this point in history. They were a small, insignificant part of the great Roman Empire, dominated the Mediterranean world and beyond for a long, long time. And there were those who collaborated with the Romans. And the Romans did not care how much money they collected as long as they paid Rome, like the taxes that the Roman Empire imposed on this small, insignificant little country. But as far as the Jews were concerned, living in Palestine at that time, tax collectors were collaborators, and they were betraying the tradition of Abraham, Moses, King David, and all of the great prophets that preceded them in history. They were traitors. And not only were they traitors, but they were dominating unjustly their fellow citizens. So looking at the objective historical situation, we can see why in the Jewish context, tax collectors were ostracized. They were not welcome as fellow Jews, collaborating with the enemy. And this is the context of Jesus in his public ministry. There were plenty of good people who were not collaborators with the enemy, with the oppressors, but he did not choose them. he chose Matthew in his booth collecting taxes for the Romans and for himself. And of course, he collaborated not only with the Romans, but with his fellow tax collectors, because they have the same sense of values, the same priorities. But Jesus plunged into this group because he saw something that we don't usually see. He was able to see the heart. People did not come to Jesus and volunteer to follow him. He went out of his way to choose, especially his disciples, 12 who would follow him as the new chosen people. They were not all high-minded, educated, and dedicated persons before they encountered Jesus. It was Jesus who converted them, transformed them, changed their priorities, and taught them how to love. But we find in today's episode from the Gospel of St. Matthew, whose feast we are celebrating today, the secret of Jesus. The secret was, as we know today in our own experience, hopefully, that Jesus had a sacred heart, and that sacred heart had special knowledge, could penetrate into the very heart of a human person and see their goodness if they only were supported and loved first. So Jesus not only invited Matthew to become his followers, and eventually he would become an apostle, but he accepted his hospitality. Now, again, in the culture of Jesus' day, if you ate with someone, especially a person who was alienated, unacceptable, you were supporting them, and you were committing a sin too by socializing with them, and you would become contaminated by socializing. But Jesus had a different power of transformation. He not only, as I said before, was a teacher, a rabbi, a prophet. He was also a liberator and reconciler. Not only by what he did during his public ministry, but especially by how he died. And that is the great mystery of how Jesus saved the world. He saved the world in loving forgiveness. It says to us, Gospel of St. Luke, on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they were doing. They did not know they were crucifying, torturing to death the Son of God, God in human terms. But our God in human terms, so in the Gospel of St. Matthew, was gentle and humble. And that is why he reached out to those who were alienated, those who were handicapped, those whose lives were a mess. Because as he says in today's Gospel, I came not just for the just, I came to heal, to save. And so we see in the concrete situation of today's Gospel and what it achieved for us personally, because Matthew was converted and learned how to be a saint, living with Jesus. And therefore, he sat down in the apostolic church and wrote the gospel according to his name. And that gospel has had impact for 2,000 years. And even you and I, as we read the Gospel of St. Matthew, are encouraged, enlightened, and introduce more profoundly to Jesus himself. This was the role that Jesus had in mind when he spoke to the tax collector in his booth named Matthew and said, "Come, follow me." We should imitate St. Matthew and also responding to our Lord's invitation to come and follow him.